As sentient beings, we find ourselves thrown into a world that inflicts immense pain and suffering. So having the option of a graceful exit should be seen as a basic, universal human right. Since our existence is better to never have been, we should all have the right to die. Welcome to the Right to No Longer Exist, a Right to Die podcast. In this show, we attempt to change the perception of society's views of voluntary euthanasia and what true autonomy could look like.
Hey everybody, Kevin here with the Right to No Longer Exist podcast. Thanks for listening and to another episode. I'm joined with a guest that is kind enough to share their story and how they got to the right to die and all the reasons of why the right to die is so important. And so I have Seth here. And Seth, thanks so much for coming on and talking with me. It really means a lot to me to have anybody on and just to share their story. So thanks a lot for offering to come on.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate you having me. And I think these kinds of conversations are very important.
Yeah, same here. Thanks. No, I appreciate it too. And they are important. And they're really rare because you're not going to find, if you see other podcasts, they're just kind of, or show, or videos or something, and it's on this topic, maybe it's always glossed over and buttered up and painted as this preventionism kind of picture. You know what I mean? Like there's always a disclaimer, or there's always someone saying, if you need help, please call 988 and all that shit. I'll never do that. I will never do that. It's just it goes against this whole thing to me. But anyway, little rant there. Sorry.
No, you're good. I've never personally seen another podcast like this, and I'm glad that it does exist.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. And I hope it's therapy for some. It would be for me. So, yeah. Anyway, tell me about yourself, or whatever you'd like to share, and whatever you're comfortable with sharing, and how you ultimately got to be interested in the right to die and all that stuff.
Well, as introduced, my name is Seth. I'm 23 years old. I'll be 24 next month. I'm a trans man. I have been feeling, I've wanted to die since I was 9 years old. Even before then, I've always been really dissatisfied with life. I've never been happy with where I was and who I was, and I can never pinpoint the reason why. It's like there's just always been a missing piece within myself. And I first realized, I truly realized my desire to die when my mother passed away. And it wasn't officially stated as the cause of death, but I have reason to believe that it was intentional on her part. And, my family raised me to be Christian, and I was taught that those who kill themselves were destined to go to hell, but I just couldn't accept that that's where my mother was going to go, because she hadn't done anything to deserve that. And that moment kind of just made me question everything. And since then, I've formed my own opinions, my own beliefs on the subject. And these desires and this want to die have just worsened over time as, things in my life progress.
Yeah, sorry about your mom. I have that. I kind of had that moment with my dad too, and he died, and but it wasn't about voluntarily going. He just died, and it just made me think of the existential stuff. I'm just like, God, like someone lives, 62 years for what? And now it's nothing. Now it's like literally nothing, and it's hard to wrestle with just thinking about how is that part of God's plan ever at all, when the mass majority of humans are just completely forgotten about it eventually.
Yeah, it's really cruel, and that's something that I couldn't really get behind too. That if God was truly as loving as people say that He is, then none of us would be in this situation to begin with. We wouldn't want to die. We'd be happy with life, and God wouldn't be putting us in these horrible situations.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's like, I know that's not like logically consistent, maybe, but I don't care, as far as me saying that. Let me first phrase it. Like, to me, that's evidence that there is no God. And I know that's not literal evidence, but to me, that is, the problem of evil, the problem of throwing you into a predicament, of being faced with hell or something like that. That all that is evidence that at the very least God is sadistic and not, he's not malevolent. He's benevolent. He's malevolent, if anything.
Yeah, exactly. The more time that passes, the more, I guess, sort of hatred I feel towards the idea of God and the way that most people see Him. I just can't bring myself to support a God like that supports and seems to just be content watching as everything happens, not doing anything to stop it.
Yeah, totally. And that's why, the whole thing makes no sense. And it feels like it's just a man-made idea and concept to help us feel better about death and all that stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
So, where you at, as far as, like, I worry about that, even though I'm an atheist and I don't believe it anymore, that the indoctrination is still embedded in your brain really, really deep in your subconscious. And I resent the fact that if I was to ever exit life voluntarily, that would be on my mind. And it would ruin a moment that could maybe be, kind of a nice moment where you're like, okay, I don't have to deal with life anymore. Like, maybe you're relaxed about it in a small way. I mean, yeah, it's tragic for people to leave always, but like, if I'm sitting here worried and stressed out and freaking out that I'm going to go to hell now, it just makes me that much more angry at the idea,
Yeah, and that's part of the reason, for this. Like, it's the scare tactic, to keep people here even when they don't want to be, because otherwise everybody would be killing themselves in order to get to heaven. But I don't believe that those who kill themselves are going to go to hell. I believe that their souls are going to go wherever they most believe that they're going to go. Like, of course, if you don't believe in a soul, that's fine too. But I just believe that whatever you personally believe to be the afterlife is where you're going to go. So if you believe in nothingness, then you'll experience nothingness. And if you believe in reincarnation, then you'll be reincarnated. And if you believe in heaven, then you'll go to heaven, and so on and so forth.
Hey, that would be awesome. Like, if God could give us that kind of control, that kind of power to choose and say, oh, based on my life and everything that's happened in my experiences, or my belief in this or lack of belief in this, it's sort of like a choose your own adventure book. You know what I mean? Like, choose your own afterlife, basically. And yeah, I want to go there, and it actually happens. Yeah, that'd be nice. I don't know what I would choose though, because I would need a frame of reference of heaven in order to want to choose heaven, so to speak, or decide on that option, you know, because I wouldn't want to just hang out with my grumpy grandma for eternity. That sounds like that sucks.
Yeah, and I feel like the concept of heaven is also kind of unrealistic. Like, it's hard to wrap my head around just being in bliss forever, especially if you consider the fact that if heaven exists, then it's likely that hell also exists. And I've seen so many Christians say that they wouldn't really be able to enjoy heaven knowing that some of the people that they care about are going to go to hell and that they'll never see them again.
Yeah.
And a lot of Christians use that as an argument as to why you should believe in God and stuff like that. But it's just weird to me.
Oh, yeah, totally. Because the whole idea of this eternal, blissful, heavenly place requires something to contrast it to. So, you know, it's kind of the asymmetry thing, you know, where in order to feel joy, you have to have some kind of deprivation first. So are you aware, if you're feeling joy for eternity, are you aware that you're relieving a deprivation? And if you're aware that you're relieving a deprivation, then, like you said, are you also aware that someone might not be being relieved of a deprivation right now? If so, that kind of hinders your joy. It makes you feel sad and empathetic and be like, oh, well, I actually kind of feel guilty about sitting here feeling eternal joy if I know someone on earth or someone in hell is suffering. Like, it's kind of glib and selfish to kind of just be like, oh, but it's all about me and my joy, you know.
Yeah, it's a very contradictory idea, and I also just disagree with the entire concept of hell in general. Nobody, absolutely nobody, even like the worst people you could possibly think of, nobody deserves eternal punishment. It's just worthless, pointless cruelty, because punishment is used to, teach someone that what they did was wrong and to give them room and opportunity to learn and improve and grow from it. But in hell, there is no learning, there is no improving. You're just forced to suffer forever. If hell were to exist, I think it should only be temporary, and the punishment should vary for each person. Giving the same punishment to everyone is really unfair. And once they truly learn from and grow from their crimes or sins or whatever, they're allowed into heaven. I think that's a much more fair way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, that could work great. And I think it was, who was it, Sam Harris, that said that line, basically what you were saying, where it really hit home for me when he said it. There's no redemptive value to hell because it's eternal suffering. So if there's no redemption from it, then what's the purpose? Yeah, and it just all makes no sense. And why would there be, like, I mean, if there's no redemptive, it's, to me, a lot of it goes to the lack of free will stuff, and you were determined to be that horrible, evil person anyway, and if God knew you were going to be that person, then why did he even create you in the first place? I mean, there's so many like silly points to it that just I couldn't help but obviously based on determinism become an atheist when I did, like 15 years ago or whatever it was.
Yeah, exactly. Like, if God is really all-knowing, why, and loving as well, why would he create people knowing that they're going to go to hell? Like, what's the point of that other than him just getting some sick entertainment out of it?
Yeah, it really proves that he can only be evil if he exists. It's so dark to say, but it's true. You know, but if he created a world where there was some kind of trial after life, and you did redeem and you go to heaven, or even on earth, God gives you some graceful exit option, like every human has, a second, a third nipple or something, and that nipple is like a instant death button. If you wanted to push it any time of your life, you could push it and go. Like, even only then you could start to be like, okay, well, hey, at least you were thoughtful enough to give someone the key to the door, at least, to leave the prison.
Yeah, and that's why I feel like everybody should have the option to check out whenever they want to, but it'll probably, unfortunately, never reach that point. And it makes me very upset that the only people that are able to really leave this world peacefully are those with terminal illnesses, just people that have no hope of ever getting better and stuff like that. But I feel like it should be open for anybody, whether you're officially diagnosed with something or not.
Oh, yeah, completely. I mean, it's really interesting that the ones that don't have certain mental illnesses, that may cause one to consider dying, are the ones that are the most loudest at determining how much life people should live or not live.
Yeah, nobody has the right to determine what someone else should or should not do. They're not living that person's life. And I have a lot of personal experience with the frustration because I have multiple chronic physical conditions that limit me significantly every single day. And I just think it's very unfair that I and many other people in similar situations can't check out peacefully, and instead I'm having to, try to find ways that could end up, just seriously harming me.
Yeah. I'm sorry. That sucks so much that people are forced to just suffer even more for suffering. And it's like, and the fact that you have to prove to yourself, to some stranger, that you're enough to go is weird to me. Like, that's why to me, the whole medical model should just be abolished. It's not working. It's a failure. It's a failed thing. Like, yeah, 90-year-olds with brain cancer can get it, but it's only a few hundred people per year, so it's not even worth talking about at this, like, to me, at this point. It should just be a human rights thing, and it's about it doesn't even matter about how sick you are. You could be healthy. You could be totally healthy, totally fine. But you have a pro-mortalist view of it all, and you're like, yeah, no, I just don't think it's fun living here. I don't enjoy watching disease and murder and wars, and I'm not having fun here.
Yeah, it's really difficult to even get to that point and just feel comfortable enough to talk about it because of the stigma surrounding it. And also, you're punished for being honest. If you tell people that you're suicidal or you're having thoughts of hurting yourself, you're just immediately seen as crazy or potentially even a threat to other people, and you're treated like a prisoner.
Oh yeah, that's some of the worst parts of all this stuff, is the manipulation that they do to you to make, just because you don't like it here, they instantly think that you're just completely crazy, and it's kind of like, no, you're just more conditioned to accept this, whatever that phrase is. I always forget. You're just more to be well adapted to a sick society isn't a measure of health, or whatever that phrase is, you know? Like, just because you think life is good doesn't mean that I'm sick for not liking life.
Exactly. Like, if someone is suicidal, they're treated as if it is their fault instead of the fault of, the world itself, putting them in this position. They're treated as if it's something that they have to change and that they have to get better from. It's just not fair. It's not ethical. It's not moral.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a really good point. I mean, it's always about, what's wrong with you, and what can, like, we need to prevent this thing from happening, and then what's wrong with you, instead of what caused this, what situations in your life that happened that created you to think this, what health conditions that you might have to make you think, and then just have some simple understanding. Just, why can't people just understand it is the baffling part.
Yeah, unfortunately, people who either somehow haven't ever experienced suicidal thoughts, or just those who only very briefly experience them, they'll never understand.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that they can't show empathy and to some degree understanding, but they just don't.
Yeah.
And their solution is to shove medications into your mouth, but never to actually solve the problem. If someone is suicidal because of financial problems or because of physical problems, they won't solve that, but they'll, keep you locked up for a week or two and, give you medications that you didn't ask for.
Yep. Or they don't even work. It was only the past few years that I learned about the failure rate of SSRIs, and I'm like, damn, I took these for 10 years. I was trying Paxil and Prozac and all that stuff, and none of it worked ever for a second for me. And every time I was like, it's not working, but I'm sure feeling the side effects though. And then they'll just be like, oh, well, then let's up the dosage. Like, that's the answer to the problem, is just upping the dosage or finding the perfect cocktail of other drugs to add in, to mix in with it all. And I've tried that. None of it has worked ever. And it would be really nice to have someone in the medical community admit that and just say, hey, like, we don't really know what we're doing here. I know that they wouldn't say that, but it would be nice to hear.
Yeah, and when medications don't work, they just give up on you. And so they just don't have anything else to do. And it's really cruel how, they're not willing. A lot of doctors aren't willing to truly sit with you and talk with you and understand. All they care about is just getting you out as soon as possible so they can get to the next patient.
Yeah. And that's times like that in my life, and that's happened, is what times in my life where I'm like, oh, okay, like, you come to this realization that you're on your own in a way, and you have to kind of find your own, like, coping mechanisms to deal with all of the shit you're going through. And like, it's a lonely place to be, but it's also kind of nice in the sense of being like, oh, well, at least I'm not reliant upon others about it, like, I didn't like that part of it where I felt kind of slavey up to other medical people. What type of tactics of manipulation that they do to you that drive you the most crazy?
I think hotlines in general, really, how just honestly predatory they are. It's basically calling the police, but with extra steps. Because a lot of the time you are going to have the cops knocking on your door, even if you say that you're not going to do anything. I've seen that happen to so many people. And it really just, it's like a coin flip. I've seen like maybe a few people say that hotlines have helped them in the heat of the moment. But I've more often seen people have really traumatic experiences. And I just don't think it's worth calling something like that when the risks are so great. Like you could potentially have your entire life turned upside down just because of a phone call, just because you wanted and needed support.
Yeah. Insane. That is so crazy. Yeah. You're calling for help and you literally receive the opposite of help. It's crazy. That baffles me so much, and I feel lucky that I've dodged that bullet. I've never called, and I was always too afraid because I kind of knew that would be, something to happen. And I'm more scared of that than I am of myself,
Yeah, I would never recommend the hotline to anybody. And every single time I see someone share the hotline number, it just really angers me because I just think about, what if there's this person who's in a really bad state of mind and they see, someone recommending the hotline and they call it because they don't know any better.
Mm-hmm.
And then something awful happens. They're taken away from their home against their will, and then they have, potentially like an incredibly high hospital bill, and they're kept longer than they have any right to be or want to be, and then they're just released, into the outside world with no further support or help. They're just expected to fend for themselves.
Yeah, and then the next impulsive moment they might have about feeling like they're going to harm themselves, they're going to not call them for help because they've known better, and then they'll check out. So, like, what help did they really do? What did they? All they did was prolong their life. That's all they did, and traumatize them more.
And that's all they're meant to do, to just prolong your life. They don't care about your actual well-being or your quality of life. All they care about is just keeping you alive for as long as you're in there. That's their only job. And once you're released, you're not their problem anymore. But it's such a traumatic experience that, the next time that person thinks about killing themselves, they're just going to try like extra harder to make sure that it works. So that's because they're going to be too scared to, go back to the hospital again.
Yeah, the consequences of the preventionism and prohibition causes damage, just like the drug war, just like prevention of abortion, whatever, coat hanger abortions. Like, if someone wants to do something, if humans are going to want to do something, they're going to do it whether there's a law against it or not. So that's so frustrating about this whole thing too, is like, just even having this conversation is got its little tiny bit of riskiness to it alone, and all we're doing is having a conversation about just why are we treated like criminals when we're not criminals?
Exactly. We shouldn't be treated as dangerous or a risk just for having a conversation about this, because like I said, and like you said, it's very important to talk about these things, but it's just something that everybody is just too hesitant to talk about because they're scared that, oh well, if we talk about it, it'll just encourage more people to do it, when in actuality talking about it makes people feel heard and like they're not some monster or animal just for having these thoughts, because they're not. They're just going through a lot, and they deserve understanding, and they deserve to be heard just like everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah. Great point. Great point. It's so true. And when you're forced to not talk about it, you start to question yourself, and you start to think, am I crazy? What's wrong? Is something wrong with me for thinking these thoughts? Because, you know, outwardly in society, it seems like no one else is thinking these thoughts, but they totally are. By the millions, people are having these thoughts. So that, you know, that's the one thing I can give, even though they have the wrong intention. I appreciate society being a little bit more about, let's talk about mental health in general, and having suicidal thoughts. Like, at least they will say that, because it at least makes people be like, oh, these thoughts are okay to have. I'm not literally insane for having these thoughts. But,
yeah, they'll support talking about it, but you can't really.
yeah,
Like when they
there's
when
a
they
catch.
give when the doctors give you like these little sheets to fill out, you know, asking you about your depression or if you're having thoughts of suicide, you can't be honest. And unless you want an evaluation, you always have to lie. You can never be truly honest to anyone about it. So you're still forced to keep most of it to yourself. The most that you can maybe admit is to having some thoughts every now and then. But even that is a risk, because for each doctor, for each therapist, what is considered a risk varies for each one. So you could talk to one therapist about your suicidal thoughts, and maybe they would be okay with discussing it with you. But then another therapist would just, you know, freak out and call the cops on you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no standard, and it all depends on the professional's worldview. Maybe personally in their own life, they're like an insanely super duper pro-life Christian, and they, you know, and if you accidentally are telling them about it, you know, you're honest with them, oh, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
So I always kind of, when they ask me that in the doctors, which drives me crazy, because it's like every time I go to the doctor for having a, you know, ingrown toenail or whatever, they're asking me about this stuff, and I'm like, my answers when they ask those questions, you know, have you had feelings of harming yourself over the past month or whatever, I don't even answer. I just say, why are you asking me this? And it sort of sparks a conversation. It gets me to feel like, to get a feel of who this person is that I'm talking to, which, whoever doctor it is, you know, like, are they in support of this whole thing, or are they not, you know? Or, and I can say, you know, something like, well, what if I said yes? What if I said it's a 5 on the 1 to 5 scale, or whatever it is they use? What would happen if I said 5? Because you're not saying 5. You're just asking them, what would happen if I said 5? And I encourage people to just ask their doctor, you know, those assessment forms that they ask you, what is the criteria for them to call someone on you? What is it that you have to say? Let's say you marked 5 on the list of the 10 questions they ask. Is that an instant 911 call for them, or do they need to talk more? Like, it's important for you to have all the knowledge to make a proper decision, because you're not the one playing games. They're the one. This is the game they're playing. So, you know, it's kind of, I get kind of stubborn, and I'm like, well, if you want to play the game, let's play your game then. And I'm gonna be really inquisitive about what it is that your intentions are behind these questions.
Yeah, the communication is very important, and it's also like just, it's made worse by the fact that, you know, that they're not asking these things because they genuinely care. They're just doing it because they legally have to. But with my therapist, I asked her like similar things. Like, I asked her like, what would be the criteria? What would I have to say to make her want to like submit me to a hospital? And You know, she told me her criteria, and now I know better. I know what to keep from her. I know what not to say, because I don't want to fall into that criteria. I mean, I do, but I don't want her to know that I do.
Yeah.
And I really wish that I could be honest with her.
Yeah.
She's told me that she wants me to be honest with her, and I do too, but I just can't, because then I'll just be sent away.
And it sucks because they're the ones that are creating those handcuffs, so to speak, the mental handcuffs where you can't talk, you're not open. They're not the ones like this where you can say whatever the hell you want. That, like, it's always this threat over your head. Like, what do I say? What you have to filter your words. That's not being honest. And it's ironic because therapy should be exactly the opposite. You should be completely open and honest with how you're feeling.
Exactly. Like, that's the whole point of therapy is to get things off your chest in a safe environment. But I can't feel safe with her when it comes to this kind of stuff. I feel more safe talking to, my really close friends about it, because I know that they're not going to call the police. They're just going to listen. And that's the most helpful thing, is to just have someone to listen without the fear of being punished for it.
Yeah. I wonder if these countries like Belgium and Switzerland that have a full right to die, I wonder if the therapy industry have different criteria and conversations with their customers, because it's a right that exists, that if they want, they can apply for it, and it's not illegal and all this stuff, So I wonder how that works over there.
Yeah, everywhere should be like that. It won't be, but it should.
Yeah. I mean, they might have their own prevention type deal too. I mean, even though it's a right in the country to apply for that, they might still have this, you're a danger to others. That's still a thing, that they need to be aware of. And if they feel like you're a danger to others, then that's different.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't be surprised if there is still an obligation to stop people when they're making an attempt.
Yeah, I bet it still exists over there too. What are your thoughts on the right to die in general? Like, do you follow the movements and things that are happening?
I don't actively follow any movements. This podcast is basically the only thing I really actively consume that relates to this topic, but I do 100% support it, and I feel like I would even without my life experiences. I just feel like it's the right thing to do, to not act like I own other people and their lives, because I don't.
Yeah, and it's so strange to me how I remember just being so young. This was even before I had depression and stuff, and all that shit kicked in to where my dark thoughts kicked in. I was just a happy kid, or well, not happy, but I was a halfway normal teenager, and I'm talking with people, and the subject came up, and this was kind of back when like Jack Kevorkian and things were going on, and so it was in the news, and people would talk, and some people would be like, yeah, those people are cowards, and nobody should have the right to die. That this is crazy. Those people are insane. Like, everything they would say, I just remember being like, what the hell are you talking about? All this is it's just compassion. Like, that's all it ended up being to me, at least. I was like, you don't want to be compassionate? Like, why? Why would you not want to be compassionate?
Yeah, I don't understand anyone who can have a mindset like that. It's one thing to not want, people to kill themselves. It's another thing entirely to just look down on people who even have thoughts like that, like considering them selfish or a coward, because it's not selfish. So many suicidal people, they stay because they don't want to hurt the people that they care about. And a lot of people who do end up doing it, they feel like, you know, they made like the world a better place, or they made the lives of the people they left behind better, because their self-hatred was just so powerful.
Oh yeah, totally. It's gross. It's sick how that's how people think, and they'll be like so against it in such a brutal way that I feel like it makes me feel like an alien, and like I'm like, you know, I don't even know. I don't want to be around you people. Like it's like I'm on Mars or something, you know.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah. There's a story of Philip Nitschke. He's a he runs Exit International. Do you know that group?
I'm not sure.
Well, he lives in, I think, Belgium, and he created a thing called the Sarcopod. Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
Well, they just did it yesterday for the first time. I guess about a 51-year-old woman from the United States exited in there, and they arrested people for doing it. And
wow,
I'm so annoyed. I read the news article like yesterday, and I'm like he spent years building this little pod, you know, that fills with gas, and you just fall asleep peacefully. And I just hope that legally it doesn't take forever for them to kind of get back on track, or prevents them from continuing on, because it's just a cool thing that he's created, and they should have those everywhere. I admire him for that.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane how far people go to keep other people alive. It doesn't matter if they're paralyzed, it doesn't matter if they're in just constant agony and there's no chance of them ever enjoying life. They still have to live. They have to suffer through every single waking moment. That's torture.
Yeah. I know. Yeah, this whole thing needs to change. I don't know how, but it needs to change. It's such a massive human rights issue. Like, this is one of the biggest issues on Earth, and nobody cares. It seems like nobody cares. Literally millions of people per year. Well, 1 million people are successful, but there's another million-ish people that fail, which is even more of a tragic thing. They fail because they tried some DIY method that ended up with them in the hospital and paralyzed or whatever for the rest of their fucking life. So it's like we should be screaming on megaphones in the street over this, you know what I mean? And nobody cares. In fact, it's the complete opposite. You'll see a suicide prevention billboard on the highway, not the opposite, which should say, if you want to die, call 988. We do, you know, you can apply here. You know, whatever. It makes me so angry sometimes. You ever get just straight up pissed off about this whole thing?
Yeah, people just who haven't experienced this kind of stuff, they act like someone who is paralyzed or has a terminal illness. They act like they have the same quality of life as just any average person, and they just put life on such a high pedestal. They believe that a life, no matter how awful or how painful it is worth experiencing more than death. And that's just not true. There are far more worse things than death.
Yeah. And that's the problem, is we humans in general, and I think it's the power of survival instinct, for one. it's the power of religion. It's and the pro-life ideological and the doctrine and ideologicals that come with that, and then just a denialism, like a sweeping under the rug. Like they want to live in a world where this doesn't exist, so they just ignore it. They'll do whatever they can to prevent it, just like, you know, animal factory farming. They don't want to know how their hot dogs got on the shelf in the grocery store. Like, they don't want to know that. They just want to buy their hot dogs and enjoy it, you know. They don't want to know the horrors behind the scenes that how it got there. But like, you know, it's just so sad that to see that, you know, that we can see that for what it is. And like, I think I do have some pity too, where I'm like, if you think this is real, you know, that people really are cowards and selfish, and you know what's the problem? You can just jump off a bridge. What's the problem? You know, these types, you know, I have pity for them too, because I'm like, man, it must be really sad to be you. It must be really sad to have a brain like yours.
Exactly. Yeah, like, religion has taken over everything. People just basically worshiping life. It's really awful. It's sad because, like you said, it just alienates the people that don't fit into that mold. You're expected to, you're pressured to, you're punished if you don't. It's just a lose-lose situation.
Yeah. And it's so sad to see that it doesn't have to be that way. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm not optimistic at all. I agree with you. I don't think it might ever happen because the survival instinct is so strong. The general population is just going to prevent it always, just to be in total denial. But is there anything in your life that's made you consider dying yourself the most? Like, if you had to give a reasons for what makes you want to go, what would be one of your top things?
Definitely my physical condition. I am basically bedridden from the constant pain and symptoms I experience. My stomach is really messed up. I can't eat much of anything. My diet has been restricted to only 3 or 4 foods, and even those foods will just randomly cause a flare-up.
I have IBS too, so I'm right there with you. It's brutal.
Yeah, exactly. It's awful. My stomach's messed up. My bladder is almost completely non-functional. I've had to go to the hospital for it many times. And it's just gotten worse as the years have gone on. And I'm just in constant pain and discomfort. And I just don't really see how a life like this is supposed to be worth living when I'm only 23, but I feel like my life is pretty much over and that I'm never going to really experience the things that other people experience and take for granted.
Dang. Yeah. That you would think that would be more than enough reason, you know, of reasons to have a graceful exit. And
not to them.
I know. Yeah, I have IBS too. I got it when I was 20, and it's been brutal ever since. And I've had pain every day, all day, every day since. And I don't know how the hell I've dealt with it so long. But I'm forced to eat. Same thing. Just basic, like, just basic list of foods that I can eat, and that's it.
Yeah, people don't seem to understand just how bad IBS is. they just see it, people who don't have it, they just see it as like a little stomach trouble every now and then. But no, it is constant pain, constant headaches, constant frustrations. Like it's something that impacts you all the time.
Yeah. I know. And it drives me nuts because if I'm at like a 5 out of 10 pain, like where that's my kind of baseline, like that's nice. I'm having a good day when it's 5 out of 10. So, but I can eat a food that I think is safe, you know, like it's the vegan burrito, let's say, whatever. I'm like, oh, it's just veggies in there. And then I eat it, and then I realize, oh yeah, I can't have tortilla shells. I don't know why, I just can't. And then I'm like nervous and scared, and then I'll literally just eating one wrong food, I could be in bed in pain for 4 straight days.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry that you experienced that too.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I'm glad that I can relate to you on that, because I know exactly what it's like. I mean, you probably have subtle different types. I mean, there's different slight types of IBS, but in general, yeah, it's the same kind of. I mean, the irony is like, not to harp again on about that, but it's the criteria to be met for a graceful exit has to be terminal. But if you really quantify everything, the amount of pain that someone might have with a chronic ailment that might last decades is a lot more pain and suffering in the end than it would be for someone that has just 6 months to live on a terminal illness. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. That's something that bothers me a lot too. Like people, well, like I said, I think everybody should be able to go, but in terms of like, you know, chronically ill people, like they're forced to live out the full extent of their lives, like however long they're fated to live, and there's nothing that they can do about it because it's chronic. It's not going to go away. There's only limited options for treatment. It's just terrible that they're expected to live out like 50, 60, however many more years of that suffering.
Yeah. And then we bog down resources and of the medical industry and the costs for resources for whatever medicines or things we need to, you know, like, and if we want out, we don't want to bog down the system more with all that stuff. Like we would help the world out by leaving. Really, it's just practically speaking, we would help the world.
Yeah, like I for sure know that I'm a burden, and that, you know, a lot of the people, or at least some of the people I know, you know, they would be better off without me, like factually speaking, financially speaking, just mentally speaking, they would be better off. And that's not just the self-hatred speaking. I mean, I do have a lot of self-hatred, but I also feel like I'm thinking rationally too.
Yeah. And that makes sense. And that's such a sad side effect too of having an ailment, where you start to feel like you're a burden to others, and the guilt that you have with that. There's a lot of psychological stuff there too. That's suffering that's happening.
Yeah, I guess, like, preface, I don't think that like other people with chronic or terminal illnesses are inherently a burden. I just think this way specifically for myself, I guess.
Yeah. Dang. I hope you figure out, you know, maybe have you considered applying for places like Dignitas or Pegasus or those you know, assisted dying places in Europe?
No, I haven't really thought about it. I don't know if I'd really be able to get there.
Yeah.
Because I can't really travel with my physical condition, unfortunately.
Yeah. That's the hard part, is so many people probably want to apply, but you got to travel to get there, and that's half the problem.
Yeah, the solution is to make it readily available everywhere. Good luck making that happen, you know?
Yeah. I wish we could just die like our pets. Yeah. Our pets
Yeah, they have more rights than we do.
I know. Yes. Yeah. It's insane. What would you is there something you could say to someone struggling with the same situation and tell them anything? I don't know, advice or anything like that. Not to be motivating or optimistic or anything, but is there any advice basically in general you'd like to give listeners to this whole subject in general?
I've never really been the best at giving advice. I feel like a lot of the time I feel like I don't really have the right to give advice considering how much I'm struggling, but the most effective way that I've been able to get through things is, it's really cliche to say, but it really is just to take things one day at a time, because the moment I start thinking about the future and what it holds, I just start to spiral. So just trying my best to stay in the moment and just doing what I can now to help distract myself and keep myself busy. That's really the only thing that helps me get through it, honestly, along with the close connections I have.
No, that's good. I agree. Yeah, it's day at a time kind of thing helps me sometimes for sure. Especially when it's when it's a really rough week or month. It's sometimes just like, oh, okay, tomorrow let's just get through the Wednesday or whatever.
Yeah, the future is scary. It's really scary.
It is, and it scares me. The part that I don't like and I've never been comfortable with is knowing that a lot of suicides are impulsive, and being afraid of the fact of that I could simply be one of those statistics. And the fear is, what would that event be to make me impulsive? Because usually people that are impulsive about it, some big event had happened, and that their partner died, or I have friends that have had this happen, and their partner dies, the next day they check out, something happens, and anyway, like, I don't know, it just scares me about, like, just this kind of daily basic anxiety about being like, oh, what could be that thing that makes me be like, okay, fuck it, I'm done, and I don't like that. It's like a constant worry, basically.
Yeah, I completely understand. It is a really scary thing to think about, like something so bad that happens that just pushes you over the edge, that makes you snap. It's not something you really want to think about at all.
Yeah.
Because like, you've already gone through so much in your life, and you've somehow managed to get through it. How bad would it have to be to just make you just want to check out, like, right then and there?
Yeah. And it must be so bad, for some people that just simply stop their car on the bridge and just walk out of their car and jump out. They just walk off the bridge with their suit on that they had at work that day, like something, whatever. It's things like that. It's just like, oh my God, something really bad had to happen. And
Yeah,
those
sorry.
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that, for the people that do it impulsively, there is always going to be the thought of, it's kind of like a pro-life mindset to have, I guess, but you can't help but to wonder, if things, if they had, given things a little time, would they have still felt that way? Would they have still done it? And, how their life, could have changed or have been different if they had decided to, not do it that night and just live out the next day.
Yeah. And I think a lot of preventionists think about that is the problem, or I think they think that that's every person's case, though. If we could just hold you and keep you alive for just 3 days, you'll get over whatever it is you got over. You lost your job, your wife left you, your dog died, whatever it is. Like, you'll start to get back on your hedonic set point, whatever, and then you'll live through it. And maybe you could, sure, but you still have to live with it forever. It's still in your mind forever. Like, whatever that traumatizing thing was.
Yeah, they definitely don't take into consideration the people where it's not an impulsive action and it's one that they've been thinking about for quite some time, whether it be months or years.
Mm-hmm.
Those are very different cases, and you can't try to treat them in the same way as you would someone who did it impulsively.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's a hybrid of two, I suppose, right? Like, you could plan for years, be planned, ready to go with a peaceful method, and then you're just, once that impulsive thing happens, you're so prepared, though, that you're not going to do a violent, gruesome method. You're going to use whatever thing it is you planned and prepared, and so it's half planned and half impulsive, and such is life, right? I mean, like, I don't know, like, it's kind of an interesting conversation now as far as saving an impulsive suicide versus saving a planned suicide. Which one are they both just as rational as the other? I don't know.
I feel like depending on the circumstances, they are. Like, even if a suicide was impulsive, I wouldn't be the one to stop them, because I don't know what that person's going through that has led them to that point.
Mm-hmm.
And I just feel like that is not my decision to make. It is theirs.
Yeah.
So whatever happens. It is tragic. I'm not gonna, try to act like I have no personal feelings on the subject, because I support the right to die, but that doesn't mean that, I'm not sad whenever someone chooses that, because it is tragic that, people feel like this is their only way out and that they don't have any other options for obtaining peace. Like, it shouldn't be that way, but the fact of the matter is that this is the world we live in, and
exactly.
if people want to go out that way, then I feel like they have, the right to do it.
Yeah, I agree too, and it depends on so many circumstances. But if it's, let's just say it's a stranger in public or something, and I don't know, they're gonna set themselves on fire or something, or let's just put it, even though I would completely support their right, I would want to maybe try to prevent in my head and say, hey, this is gonna be painful. Maybe you should, like, but I would also selfishly protect myself, because I could be harmed. So I hate to say it that way, but if I don't know the person and I don't know their intent, and because some people go out in a retaliatory type way, and it's it's to get vengeance on someone or make some spiteful point, or and some people are just straight up not mentally stable in that time, and I'll concede that. I'm not saying every suicide is rational, because some of it might be really the whole idea of it is almost a terrorist idea, So I don't want to be part of, a victim of the idea that they might want to take others with them, that kind of an idea. That's when it becomes a serious, like a true mental illness, violent crime, rather than peaceful. So it depends. Yeah, it totally depends. But I would be hesitant, I think, to, if I don't know the person and stuff. If I knew the person, I'd be like, wait, hold on a sec, let's talk. But I would be talking to them about it in the right way, not the wrong way. Like, life is great. Hang in there. Pull up your bootstraps. No. I'd be like, no, what you're going to do is painful. Please don't. You can think of another way to do this or something.
Yeah, that's how I feel like I would think too. Like if I saw someone about to end their lives in a really painful, unpleasant way, like you said, like setting themselves on fire or drowning, stuff like that, like I would definitely feel tempted to want to like stop them in that case, not stop them from like killing themselves in general, but just making them like consider a less violent and painful method if available. Yeah. But at the same time, I guess if they're choosing something as awful as setting themselves on fire, maybe they don't have anything else. But at the same time, it is definitely something that I would at least want to bring up to them. I wouldn't want their last moments to be them in agony.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough, it's complex. Everybody's different. Everybody's situation's different. Everybody's personality is different. So it's hard to judge all of that stuff. But that's in the context of preventing. But giving rights as a basic human right, that applies to all. It doesn't matter what your personality is. It shouldn't, at least. And it should be available to everybody. And if the person with the gasoline is about to do his thing, and there was a right to die though, and they knew that they could just go to this pharmacy and say, hey, I'm Johnny, I want the death with dignity pill, I want to get my, like, they would do that. Like a massive percent of people would do that.
Yeah, for real. Like another thing is that like that I just thought of is, people who sometimes do violent methods or painful methods, they do it because they feel like they deserve it. But I would say that that's just not true. Like it's not, your fault for being in this position. It's the world's, and you shouldn't punish yourself for suffering. You're already suffering enough. Like, don't make your final moments here in this life like as like purposely painful, because that's not what you deserve.
That was excellently said. I can't agree more. That was really a great point. It's so true. Thank you. That was a great thing to say. I like it.
Yeah, I really hope that nobody like does that to themselves. It's just not fair to themselves,
No, yeah, I know. I mean, once you get to that place, you never asked to get there. You're in a situation you found yourself in, and give yourself some grace as much as you can. Because
oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. No, sorry.
No, I believe that, like you do as well, that everybody deserves a peaceful exit, or at least if it is going to be painful, it should be, really quick. But
Yeah.
Unfortunately, a lot of people don't really have access to a method like that, and they do have to suffer while they die, and it's just really tragic.
Yeah, it's beyond awful, and it's pretty crazy how it's not on the news ever once. They might do a story though, which is tragic and everything, right? Like a school shooting happened in Maryland, and 4 kids died, and the shooter got arrested, or the shooter killed themselves, and all that is a tragedy, sure. But I struggle with that, because I also kind of think in my head, yeah, but there was 50,000 suicides today too. Like just as violent, if not even way more violent than that. I don't want. I obviously don't have expectations that are going to run a news story every day. But, oh, another 50,000 died, but like, make at least one story, and if the media even does make a story, it's actually biased. It has a bias of pro-life in it. It's not about giving the human right to die. A lot of it is someone was arrested today for, some guy was arrested today for trying to euthanize his wife. What? Like, that sounds romantic as hell to me.
Yeah, that's something I think about too, how people have just become so desensitized to like death in general, though at the same time, everybody or most people are scared of it. But when it happens to other people, like, they're just not affected by it at all, really, unless it's someone they know. Like, they'll feel like, some empathy for the people, for the families of, that when they lose someone. But, they just kind of, feel sad for a moment, then go out their day. Sorry, that is really loud thunder.
I'm glad. I just appreciate you coming on. I really do. And I think the things you said are going to hit home for a lot of people and be really meaningful to them. And so on their behalf, thank you. I'm grateful, because I feel like they definitely would be grateful too, for you to have the courage to get on and talk with me.
Yeah, I'm grateful to have the opportunity. I'm not really optimistic of anything really changing like that much for the better in terms of the right to die.
Mm-hmm.
But it is definitely something that I hope for. And yeah, I guess, the saying, hope for the best, expect the worst.
Yeah. I like that. No, and I'm with you too. Yeah, I don't expect too much of a change, and maybe some countries might sort of start to have a little bit of a thing, but I feel like it'll be so bottlenecked that it'll still be 0.00001% of the population, that might have that right.
Yeah.
I think humans are too barbaric and stuff to have this degree of compassion everywhere.
Yeah, the compassion and the empathy is solely restricted to the people that they know well, and anybody else, they just couldn't care less, really.
Yeah, it's a good point. And it's a flaw in human thinking, where once it happens to you, you really, really care. You really give a shit. But if it's someone else in some other country or state, like, oh, that's a bummer, but whatever. What's for lunch? That kind of thing.
Yeah, it's not affecting me,
Yeah.
And with a mindset like that, things are never going to change.
Yeah, I agree. And there's just so many people that have that. It's just, and it's hard though, because at the same time, I will talk to friends, and some friends I have are Christians, and and they're full on Christian, and all that stuff. I'm just friends I've had for a long time or whatever, and and I'll talk about the right to die, of course, because I know that it's my little obsession. But they'll be like, yeah, totally, you should give a right to, of course, people deserve a right to die. Like, they get it. Like, I think a lot of people get it and agree with it. It's just when it comes to the voting booths and legislation, everybody gets a little queasy and standoffish.
Yeah.
And nervous to sign off on that for some reason.
Yeah, they're hesitant to, like, really take action. And, they might just be scared of, the consequences for that.
Yeah, exactly. Which is a bummer, because it kind of maintains that status quo of people continuing to drink bleach or whatever. Which you think would be enough for people to be like, hold on a second, this is a big problem.
Yeah, if people are, being desperate enough to drink bleach and do stuff like that, then we've got a serious problem going on.
Totally. Well, it's been super awesome to talk with you and hear your opinions and everything. I really appreciate you coming to chat with me and stuff, and obviously nice to meet you.
Yeah, I enjoy this conversation, and I once again appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak with you.
Yeah, of course. I'm happy to have you, and I hope that whenever and however you have your exit, it's peaceful and pain-free.
And I wish the same to you as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks for chatting, Seth. I really appreciate it. And take care.
You as well. Take care.
You have been listening to the Right to No Longer Exist, a Right to Die podcast. We hope that you have enjoyed your time and found the information valuable. Please visit us at therightttonolongerexist.com to learn more about our organization and mission statement. You can also follow us on our social media platforms at The Right to No Longer Exist. There you will find links to our individual channels as well. If you would like to contact us, please email therightttonolongerexist@gmail.com. Thank you for your time, and let's remember that during the time that it took to listen to this podcast, dozens, if not hundreds of people endured a horrific death by suicide. Let's fight together for a world where this doesn't happen anymore. See you next time on the Right to No Longer Exist podcast.